John and his girlfriend Mary decide to become bank robbers. Mary does the actual robbing at gunpoint inside the banks, while John waits outside as the getaway driver. They are initially successful with a string of heists that make headlines, and they become folk heroes. Until one day, their luck runs out and they get caught. At trial, the judge condemns Mary to 10 years in prison, while John gets 2 years. However, once they get to their respective prisons, they discover that due to a clerical error, John will be serving 10 years and Mary only 2. Despite of her insistence, John convinces Mary to keep quiet about it. After 2 years, Mary gets out, and she continues to visit John faithfully every month, and they exchange letters and phone calls regularly for the remainder of his 10 years. Finally, after he does his time, John gets out and is joyfully reunited with Mary. They get married and move to a different state and start anew, leaving their life of crime behind. They raise a family with children and grandchildren, and eventually reach old age after having lived a happy marriage. On their 50th wedding anniversary party, the entire family and friends are gathered. A great celebration is had, with many laughs and stories, recounting their life together. The conversation turns to the secrets to a happy marriage. One of the guests asks Mary why she decided to stick with John while he was in prison, despite all of the hardships. Mary answers, "Well, you know you have found the one when you finish each other's sentences." A redneck from Kentucky finally gets married to his sweetheart. On their wedding night, he finds his bride dressed in the most alluring piece of lingerie he's ever laid eyes on. With a sultry look, she says to him,
"I want you to know that you'll be my first and only man."
The redneck's face turns beet red with anger. He quickly puts his clothes back on, grabs his wife and throws her in his truck. Without a word, he drives her straight back to her parents' home and drops her off. Confused and concerned, her father calls the redneck a few minutes later to ask what's the matter, to which the redneck replies, with a huff of indignation, "Well, if she ain't good enough for her own family, she sure as heck ain't good enough for mine." An elderly couple were on a road trip across the country. The woman was behind the wheel, cruising along, when she got pulled over by a highway patrol officer. The officer approached the car and said, "Madam, did you know you were speeding?" The woman was hard of hearing, so she turned to her husband and asked, "What did he say?" The old man yelled back, "He says you were speeding." The patrolman continued, "May a license, please?" The woman turned to her husband again and asked, "What did he say?" The old man yelled, "He wants to see your license." The woman handed over her license to the officer. As the patrolman inspected it, he said, "I see her from Arkansas. You know, I spent some time there once and went on a blind date with the most unattractive woman I've ever laid eyes on." The woman turned to her husband and asked, "What did he say?" The old man, with a grin on his face, yelled back, "He thinks he knows you." 3 women die together in an accident and go to heaven. When they get there, St. Peter says, "We only have one rule here in heaven, don't step on the ducks." So they enter heaven, and sure enough, there are ducks all over the place. It is almost impossible not to step on a duck, and although they try their best to avoid them, the first woman accidentally steps on one. Along comes St. Peter with the ugliest man she ever saw. St. Peter chains them together and says, "Your punishment for stepping on a duck is to spend eternity chained to this ugly man." The next day, the second woman steps accidentally on a duck, and along comes St. Peter, who doesn't miss a thing. With him is another extremely ugly man. He chains them together with the same admonishment as for the first woman. The third woman has observed all this, and not wanting to be chained for all eternity to an ugly man, is very, very careful where she steps. She manages to go months without stepping on any ducks. But one day, St. Peter comes up to her with the most handsome man she has ever laid eyes on. Very tall, long eyelashes, muscular. St. Peter chains them together without saying a word. The happy woman says, "I wonder what I did to deserve being chained to you for all of eternity." The guy says, "I don't know about you, but I stepped on a duck." Bob left work one Friday evening, but it was payday, so instead of going home, he stayed out the entire weekend, partying with his mates and spending his entire wages. When he finally appeared at home on Sunday night, he was confronted by his angry wife and was barraged for nearly 2 hours with a tirade befitting his actions. Finally, his wife stopped the nagging and said to him, "How would you like it if you didn't see me for 2 or 3 days?" He replied, "That would be fine with me." Monday went by and he didn't see his wife. Tuesday and Wednesday came and went with the same results. But on Thursday, the swelling went down just enough where he could see her a little out of the corner of his left eye. Leroy was a worker at a small, quaint pharmacy in Arkansas, but his skills as a salesman left much to be desired. Time and time again, he just couldn't seem to find the item the customer needed. Arnold, the owner, had grown increasingly frustrated with Leroy's inability to make a sale, and he decided to give him an ultimatum. He sternly warned Leroy that if he missed one more sale, he'd be out of the job. As luck would have it, a man walked into the pharmacy shortly thereafter, coughing and hacking away. He approached Leroy and asked for their best cough syrup to relieve his symptoms. Leroy, determined to make the sale and keep his job, searched high and low for the cough syrup but just couldn't locate it. Desperate, and remembering Arnold's warning, he grabbed a box of laxatives off the shelf, sold it to the man, and instructed him to take the entire box at once. The customer, trusting Leroy's recommendation, complied and then made his way outside, leaning against a post for support. Arnold, who had been observing the entire exchange, confronted Leroy and demanded to know when it just happened. Leroy, trying to justify his actions, explained, "Well, the man came and looking for something to help with his cough, but I couldn't find the cough syrup. So I gave him laxatives instead and told him to take the whole box in one go." Arnold's face turned beet red as he exploded, "You did what? Laxatives aren't going to cure a cough. They're for a completely different issue." But Leroy replied, "I think you'll find they will. Just take a look at him. He's too afraid to cough." My friends, if you want to watch other funny jokes, subscribe to the channel.